weekend of May 18th, Deadpool 2 continued the box office dominance of comic book movies we've seen so far in 2018. The R-rated Fox movie based on the Marvel property opened to $125 million domestically, which is a little bit lower than the original Deadpool did back in 2016, but nonetheless an impressive feat. While the real hurdle was getting the original Deadpool movie off the ground, Deadpool 2 also had its share of production difficulties. Most notably, Tim Miller, the director of the original Deadpool, dropped out of this one due to creative differences with lead Ryan Reynolds. Deadpool 2 ended up directed by David Leitch, and the response to the second one has been a little bit more all over the place than the first. So who was really in the right here, Ryan Reynolds or Tim Miller? Would the movie Miller might have given us have been better than the one we ultimately got? That, and all other things Deadpool, is the topic of discussion for this roundtable, where I'm joined by Tom Connors and guest correspondents Brooke Rotschild and Jeffery Thompson.
Hello.
Hello, guys.
Hello, YouTube.
Before we dig into Deadpool Part 2, let's go back to the first movie. What did you all think about the original movie? And were you a fan of the comics before it? Jeffrey?
I thought the first movie was very engaging. It was something new for the superhero genre, and I was definitely excited about it and for what's to come. It definitely knocked us off our seats, and believe it or not, it actually inspired Logan having an R rating. I was always a big fan of the Deadpool comics. My father, used to buy me the comics, so yeah, I had always been reading them since I was a kid.
As far as Deadpool was concerned, I've always been a really big fan of the Deadpool comics. I really did like his initial start as a villain, and I'm really happy that he's finally got his chance to transfer to Cellulite properly. I'm sure we're all aware of the dismal appearance he had on film first, with him having his mouth shut, and it's so ironic for the work with the mouth to have his defining quality taken away, the first time he ever hits this big screen. So to actually see him done properly was actually kind of a big deal. But yeah, I'm used to when companies transfer him to a different realm or piece of media, video games and stuff, they've always taken quite good care of him. I'm not sure if you've seen Marvel vs. Capcom, but they did a really, really, really good job transferring him into there. So I actually had high hopes for his solo feature film, especially when Ryan Reynolds was cast to play him. That's pretty much been a fan dream, since he's been around in movies doing more. So yeah, I was really excited for the film. Tom?
As far as my introduction to the character, I don't recall knowing too much of him in the comics, but I do remember seeing him in other media, like Brooke brought up with the video games, and I do think I seen him in a couple of cartoons, perhaps. But then I got to learn a little bit more about him over time, the more popular he became, and the movie at the time was the best representation of the character because they were actually able to give him full bore to go balls out, basically, for lack of a better term, with the R rating, and for the most part, they captured, I'd say, probably about 75 to 90% of what I know of Deadpool from the comics and stuff. And I was really impressed with the first film. I think when it first came out, I gave it a rating of 10 out of 10, which I have this bad habit of doing. Even though people think I'm really hard on movies, for some reason I'm very generous with my ratings, even though I'm rough on them. But I think in time, I just watched it last week, and I'd give the movie a 9 out of 10 still. It still holds up pretty well. Still very funny, very tight, very well balanced. I think Tim Miller and Ryan Reynolds had captured lightning in a bottle, and I think that's going to resonate later on in this roundtable. But yeah, that's pretty much my feelings on the film and Deadpool in general. I've always kind of been a fan of the character since I was introduced to him. Andre?
I first heard about Deadpool in conjunction with the 2009 Wolverine movie, in which Tom Rothman saw to it that his mouth had been sewn shut. I'd learned about Deadpool not from that movie, but over the fan outrage to that movie and the handling of Deadpool in it. That's how I first became aware of the character. Since then, I've learned much more about the theory and who he is and what makes him unique, and I always thought that he sounded really cool, but I actually haven't read that many comics with him, certainly not the ones that fans consider to be the best ones. I've read Max miniseries, and I read the entire Thunderbolts series, the one featuring both Deadpool and the Red Hulk and the Punisher, which I thought was awesome. So I think he's a really cool character from what I've read of the comics. which honestly isn't all that much. Like, I've never read the stories with him and Cable from the 90s and stuff like that. The first movie I thought was amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, looking forward to more Deadpool in many other movies to come. And that brings us to this movie, namely Deadpool 2. So we've established that we were all fans of the character to one extent or another. Now, what did that mean for the excitement going in to see part 2? Jeffrey?
Well, going into Deadpool 2, as I think you or Tom mentioned earlier, because of the fact that Tim Miller, he left the project, my excitement sort of went down, but I was still excited because Ryan Reynolds was involved and because Josh Brolin was going to play the role of Cable. So I was a little bit excited. Brooke, what about you?
Well, me personally, I chose to keep my expectations kind of low. As you said, Tim Miller departed because of creative differences. And whenever you hear things like that going on behind the scenes, things never usually bode well for the end product. And even though I heard a lot of great things about the first Deadpool before I saw it, and I was really excited because I was a big fan of the character, I chose to keep my expectations low then. So it was pretty much of the same thing. When I saw the end product and stuff like that, I was pretty surprised at how well it turned out. I do think they had pretty big shoes to fill from the impact of the first movie. And being that it follows Avengers so closely, the word being having some big shoes to fill is definitely my defining expectation. So I kept them low, but I did kind of had something like an underlying expectation. Tom?
Yeah, this is supposed to be kind of a short section, but unfortunately it's going to be a little bit longer with me because, as the quote goes from Godfather Part 2, I believe it is, this is the business we've chosen. And in the business that I'm in, we sometimes dabble in spoilers and story leaks, as Andre likes to say. And recently we did a video about Deadpool, and because of those story leaks and the trailers that started coming out, they were confirming what we were suspecting from those leaks. So unfortunately, going into the movie, I had very low expectations because of what we reported. And yeah, we'll get into more of that later, but I had very, very low expectations despite loving the first film quite a bit. Andre?
Yeah, I'm actually quite similar to you in that sense, because Deadpool 2 is a movie that I was really excited about right up until the moment that Tim Miller dropped out. And then we heard about the conflicts between him and Ryan Reynolds, and then I was like, ooh, yeah, that really did put the dampener on my excitement, because Ryan Reynolds, he loves Deadpool. And he's the perfect man for Deadpool, and he knows how to do Deadpool right. But like so many others, he probably needs someone to keep him a little bit in check and maybe steer him in the right direction where he wants to veer off course. And likewise, he can also steer Tim Miller in the right direction if he wants to veer off course. And the two of them working together with the writers, that worked wonders for the first Deadpool. And now they suddenly can't work together. That to me was troubling, very troubling. So I was much more anxious about Deadpool 2 from that moment on. And then we started hearing more details about where the story was going, and yeah, I wasn't a fan of all of that. So I actually went in with pretty low expectations. So we all had fairly different expectations to the movie, but then we all saw it. And guys, were your expectations met? What did you think about the final movie? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? If so, why? Jeffrey?
I like the movie because I like the representation of Cable. Also because I'm actually not a huge fan of the way the X-Men have been done. I think that they did a better portrayal of Juggernaut overall than what we have seen previously. Also, I think Colossus was much better in Deadpool's franchise than he's been in any of the previous X-Men films. I like the fact that they introduced more mutants, just the gags and the cutaways. I think that was done relatively good. My expectations were, I was satisfied. Brooke?
Well, as far as it meeting my expectations, as I said before, they were relatively low, but with a hint of spice. So it did kind of meet the spice. Like, as Jeffrey said before, Juggernaut was definitely one of the highlights for the movie. And I'm sure I'm in the camp of the people who got horrendously trolled by Fox and the writing staff by thinking that X-Force would have a larger part in the movie. So I was kind of very interested to see what Terry Crews would do and stuff like that. But yeah, just say, I would have preferred the movie if they used him more. Like, I do think they went in a lot as compared to the first movie. I do think they went in a lot more heavier on a comedy, and for some scenes that worked really well, and for some scenes it kind of fell flat. Like, I was really surprised by the Brad Pitt cameo they had for Invisible Guy and stuff like that. That came out of nowhere, and if you weren't paying attention, you'd really miss that. So there was a lot of smart gags as well that hit home and stuff. But as far as comparison to the first movie and stuff like that, I think they're two kind of different movies. As the first one had a more of a grittier tone and like a more, hey, we want you to take this project, what we're doing, seriously. Whereas this was kind of like a lot more tongue-in-cheek. And because of the character, they can kind of get away with that. But because of the bar and precedent the first one set, I'm not sure if too many people are going to be happy with what they saw. Like, me personally, because this is the first time Juggernaut has ever been done properly on film, like and everything he did was just like cool. So I'm a little bit biased about this. And Cable, he was cool as well. So yeah, I this pretty much kind of met my expectations and I liked it. Yeah. Tom?
Well, I would have hoped, knowing what I did and going in with low expectations, I would have been pleasantly surprised. But unfortunately, knowing every story beat, I don't want to say that it was a bad movie, because I do recommend the movie. And in a world where the first Deadpool didn't exist, this would be a great, great, great movie, and I'd be praising it left and right. But unfortunately, this is a world where Deadpool 1 exists, and this movie just didn't live up nearly to the hype at all. I do like the movie, though. Like I said, I'd give it like a 7 out of 10, but it's still like 2 steps below the first film. There's a lot of things that I didn't like about it, and there's a lot of things that I loved about it, and we'll get into those in more detail here in this next portion. But yeah, overall, it kind of let me down. Andre?
Yeah, I feel much the same way. I liked the movie fine. There were some points of greatness in it, and there were some points of really in it as well. Like, some things really underwhelmed, or I thought that they really could have done a lot more with it in editing, and even at the scripting stage, and certainly in the direction stage. So yeah, it was a movie of extremes. Some parts were great, and some parts fell really, really flat. So yeah, I'm of mixed opinions on it. Apart from one thing, seeing the Juggernaut in live action, like real live action, and not the stupid fat Ram Man wannabe Juggernaut from X-Men The Last Stand, that was a blast. And who's with me? Let's give Juggernaut a solo movie.
He was played by Ryan Reynolds. I don't know if anybody here on the panel knows that.
Yeah, I saw that, but I would never have guessed. I wasn't able to recognize who was playing him in the movie itself.
I knew the voice, but yeah, I wasn't a fan of how the CGI looked, but we'll get into that later too. But otherwise, yes, I was very, very pleased by the portrayal of the character in a lot of ways.
Now we only need to give him the red glorious uniform, and then we're good to go. But I will say, though, I agree with you guys that the X-Men have been handled so much better here, especially Colossus. And just like, look at how amazing this Colossus is compared to the previous Colossus in the X-Men movies. That was such a waste, in my opinion at least.
Yeah, Colossus had an arc almost like Deadpool did in the film, basically.
Yeah, it was a great character, and he got significantly beefed up from the first movie, which was awesome. Oh, yeah. So clearly, we all liked the Juggernaut, but what about the rest of the movie? And was the change of directors really obvious? Let's dig into the movie itself, and let's begin by the story. What did you all think about the opening scene, Deadpool's love life, and the general story of Deadpool finding redemption by saving this wayward kid? Jeffrey?
I think it was good that he ended up saving the kid. Obviously, part of the stakes were having to involve Cable's future, so him saving the kid, had something to do with that, and also sort of giving the kid a safe present to live in, and a friend to lean on. So I think that was, sort of the good ordeals about it, and which ultimately led to Deadpool using the time travel device to save the woman he loves, Brooke.
See, here's the thing. Though I have more or less positive feedback on the movie as a whole, the story is one of the things I'm a little bit spotty about. Like, as far as the motivation for like saving the child, like the child himself got on my nerves, so his life wasn't too much of a bargaining chip that I was really. I really wanted to see that bullet, that Cable's bullet, hit him and stuff like that. Like maybe if he wasn't so obnoxious, I would have felt more stakes as regards his life and stuff. But as regards his whole wife, I really do like them as a couple and stuff. And at the risk of sounding like a beta, for me, that's where the main stakes were. Him, like Deadpool, being able to have some form of redemption through being able to atone and make things right with his partner. So for me, that's where the major stakes of the movie were. Tom?
Yeah, I'll get into a little bit more about the kid here in a minute. I gotta say something about the opening scene. I don't have an issue with them killing Vanessa. My issue was with the fact that we go through this whole thing with Deadpool killing all these people, and all of a sudden he's running from a couple of guys who wound up being the same guys that killed Vanessa. To me, that bugged the piss out of me, because it's like he could have easily killed all those guys, no problem. And just that setup was just kind of really not well thought through, and that's kind of something that's going to kind of continue on through the story. And that's the whole thing, is it just felt like to me that the story needed at least one more pass in the script stage. And another thing you're going to keep hearing me say going forward is I'm not sure that losing Tim Miller was the right decision here, because this is where things start to fall apart, that he kept so tight and the balance there, and the balance was all off. Because off from that first scene when she dies, they try to jump right back into jokes again. And for anybody who wants to say that, the MCU has a problem with its joke placement and having too many jokes, yeah, Deadpool's supposed to be more of a comedy, but that's not the moment you want to start doing really hammy jokes and expect the audience to laugh, because nobody in the audience laughed through that whole opening section. And I noticed that throughout the film, very sporadic laughs in the small audience that I happened to see the film with, and it was only at certain jokes at certain times, never all at the same time. So even though the film had a lot more jokes and was funnier throughout, the story hurt the comedy aspect of it going forward. Even though there was more comedy, the tone really wasn't built for the two to meld so well. So I feel like this movie was really missing Tim Miller in the end, but that's kind of how I felt about the story and the structure. The redemption too, I felt the same way Brooke did, even probably more so. I hated the kid. I could have cared less. I was like, this kid is obnoxious, and it's not his fault. It's the direction, it's the casting, how the story uses the kid. And I said this in my review. So yeah, that's just my biggest beef with it, is it was either just a completely miscasted role, or the directors / screenwriters didn't know how to handle this character, and they did it very poorly, to the point where, like Brooke, I had no investment in the overall story, because I didn't care about what happened to this kid. I cared more about Cable killing this kid than I did the other way around. So I was kind of rooting more for Cable throughout. But yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more here in a bit. Andre?
Yeah, no, I feel very much the same way, actually. I thought that the movie was a little bit off from the intro sequence, which tried to replicate the first, but it wasn't... Yeah, it just was lacking something. It didn't quite work in the same way. I also thought it was quite cheap that they killed off the love interest right in the intro sequence, as we knew that they would from the story leaks. But still, I felt that was not like the great way to go about it, and then let the story arc be him finding redemption by trying to save this kid who is going to be a really, really horrible, vicious killer, and he certainly has all the traits intact for it. And I just found him unsympathetic. That's not a slight against the actor portraying him, but again, as you say, it's the writing. It's the directing and all of the things coming together which made me really not feel for him. And really, if anything, I felt more sympathy with Cable trying to go back in time to rid the world of this horrid creature. So yeah, there was that. So no, I wasn't sold on the story. It was still an entertaining movie despite all of that, but the story kind of hindered it, in my opinion. But beyond the story, there's also the characters, which can either elevate or further sink a story. And outside of Deadpool himself, which is Ryan Reynolds, and Ryan Reynolds just did his thing, there is Cable, who is the most noteworthy. Guys, what did you all think about Cable? Jeffrey?
I thought Cable was pretty good. I honestly, and I don't know, I may be in a minority on this. I think he was underused in the film. Like I said, there was no clear-cut backstory. His exposition was actually explained via dialogue. And in the film industry, there's something called show don't tell. But so from that point, I didn't think that I felt like he was underused. And also, I mean, the actor is excellent, don't get me wrong, but Cable was just underused. He was underused. So I was kind of let down by that. Brooke.
Yeah, Cable, I think Josh Brolin is definitely one of the Marvel men at the moment and stuff like that. He's doing very well. On one hand, he's, just erasing worlds as Thanos, and then on the other hand, he's just literally a Terminator as Cable. And I think he's just, on point. I agree with Jeffrey. I don't think he got that much exposition. His opening scene could have definitely done with a prior 5 minutes just to extend it to show why he was so upset. I definitely, if they did reshoots on this film, like we heard and stuff like that, that's one of the scenes that definitely could have used some extensions and whatnot. I really, really, really do like the way Cable was portrayed and stuff. As I said, I ended up rooting for him when it came to him going after the boy and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely think they did well. Tom?
Man, this has got to be the year of Brolin. I mean, Brolin's just knocking it out the park. Between this and Thanos right now, I mean, two of the best anti-villains, I guess is what you could call them, because Cable kind of does start out as the villain in the story and then later becomes an active protagonist, I guess you could call it. He was just one of the best parts of this movie, and I think I'd probably sit there and listen to Josh Brolin read a phone book. He's that good of an actor. He'd be like, Aaron Orenson, 555-66-222. I'd sit there all day listening to him because he's just got one of those, and he engages you. And even though, like these guys said, they didn't really show his backstory, even through just the little exposition he was given, he portrays that angst so well for his daughter and family that you feel, like I said, I rooted for him in the story more so than I did for the kids. So I was just like, yeah, get him, Cable. But yeah, Andre?
I also liked Cable, and Josh Brolin did amazing in bringing him to life. At least I think so. As I said, I've actually never read any stories with Cable, so I know what he looks like from the comics, and that's pretty much it. So all I can see is what is on screen. And on screen, Josh Brolin did awesome. Of course, because he's Josh Brolin, and everything he does is awesome. However, that being said, one of the points of contention between Ryan Reynolds and Tim Miller, which was a big part of the reason why Miller chose to leave the production, or got fired, whoever you choose to believe, was the casting of Cable. Tim Miller wanted Kyle Chandler for the role, which I thought, just looking at Cable in the comics, was a weird choice. But now, after having seen the movie, I can kind of see why Tim Miller would want Kyle Chandler for that role. And as I was watching, I was thinking, Josh Brolin is pretty awesome here, but wouldn't it be sweet if it was Kyle Chandler instead? I think that could have worked. And I'm left with the question, what might have been?
I think they had been a more sympathetic character in a way, but yeah, I think Brolin still delivered, yeah.
Yeah, he absolutely did. Let's move on to the next set of characters that really caused waves, and that would be Negasonic Teenage Warhead and her girlfriend. What did we all think about that, Jeffrey?
Well, I think her character was pointless in this. For she had more of I think she was better in the first film as far as development and establishment. But this film right here, her character, she didn't have that much screen time. She didn't have any time to shine. And then they were just, oh, this is her girlfriend and blah blah blah. That did not serve the story. Her being a lesbian in a relationship with a woman did not serve the story. So why was it even brought up in the film? That's why I didn't understand. It was just so annoying. And, at the end of the film, she really didn't do anything to help the guys in beating Juggernaut. She was just pointless. What was her purpose in this movie? That's really what I want to know. And what was the purpose in talking about her being in a lesbian relationship with the other one? The other chick, I don't even remember her name because she was just, they were just two pointless characters in this movie. X them out and, keep in two of the other characters that Deadpool ended up recruiting on his X-Force team. I was actually, sad that they died, but more on that later.
I have a feeling we'll see them again, but yeah.
Yeah, this is literally about to become an echo chamber for the next 3.5 minutes because I completely concur. Basically, in the first movie, Negasonic, Teenage Mutant Ninja Warhead, whatever, she was actually a very interesting character, like, with a very cool arc. She had a lot of angst and stuff, and when she did get to show and prove her moxie, it was very cool. It was very, very, it was exciting, but in this, she has definitely been relegated to a side character. And there's some side characters in movies that stand out through occasional quips and whatnot, but she was literally just there, just to be like, hey, remember her from the first movie? And her girlfriend, like cool. We're in an age where people are gay and whatnot. Totally don't mind that, whatever. But this was literally just here for being here's sake. It was like, hey, check it out, she's a lesbian, and it's like, that serves actually no point for narrative, serves no point for her character arc or anything. And hey, don't forget, lesbians can be smart and build time machines. Hey, do you know what I'm saying? I just didn't get all of that. It seemed like she was really there just to appease some weird fantasy. And that whole running gag that Deadpool had with her girlfriend, to me personally, that whole joke fell flat. I did think her hair was cooler in this, I'm not gonna lie. So I guess I'll give her that. Her hair was definitely cooler. But yeah, that's all I pretty much have to say. She was just there. She's lesbian now. Cool.
I'm probably playing devil's advocate here, but I have a feeling at one point Domino and Negasonic Teenage Warhead had a little bit more separation, but they had to cut down the script, and a lot of their character got smushed together because at some points they seem almost interchangeable in how they talk to Deadpool. Like, you could pretty much give Negasonic Teenage Warhead all of Domino's lines and you wouldn't notice. And frankly, like you guys said, she was very underutilized considering how well she was set up in the first film. I was kind of looking forward to her character, and they kind of let me down in that arena. She was just kind of there to be there because they needed her there to be part of the group because she was in the first movie. Really, I mean, they could have not had Domino and just gave all her stuff to Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and I think we'd all be probably a little bit happier. She would have had a little bit more to do with the story. But then again, you'd be losing another female character, so whatever, you can't do that either. So, I mean, I don't know if the whole thing was meant to be a comment on the SJW stuff where they just shove in characters, and if that's the case, fine, it's funny in that sense. But that's the kind of joke you do in a television show, not in a movie, when it has nothing to do with the overall arc of the story.
Now, basically, I am kind of upset that they did take away development and screen time from other characters like X-Force. Like, maybe we could have had more of them where Negasonic friend was, or maybe they could have joined X-Force and actually had more of a role with substance.
No, I agree a little bit with all of you. To begin with, I really, really liked Negasonic in the first movie. To me, she was one of the standouts. So I was a little bit disappointed that Colossus got such a beefed up part. Sorry, I was not disappointed about Colossus getting a beefed up part, but I was disappointed about Negasonic not getting it too. Instead, she got a girlfriend, and she had to divide the screen time with this girlfriend. And I don't mind her getting a girlfriend at all. Good for her. But what I did mind was this really stupid joke about this girlfriend and Deadpool saying hi to each other in this stupid Family Guy cutaway joke, repeating it, 3, 4, 5 times, whatever. Anyway, moving on to the next character. We spoke about the kid already, the kid that Deadpool has to save, like the one who's destined
Russell.
to be like a new mutant. Russell, was that his name? Okay, I had forgotten. That kid. Anyway, what did you all think about that kid? Jeffrey?
Oh, God, I'm done with his fat ass. They could have got another actor to play that character. He just rubbed me the wrong way. What do you think?
Rick?
Initially, when you see him and stuff like that for the first time in that standoff and stuff, it was almost kind of cool and stuff. What I like about this film is that the writers were somehow self-aware of the exact moments the audience would start to hate him, because he started off kind of cool, but by the time he was in prison, you started to hate him, and when he was getting punched in his face by the adult, I found that so satisfying and stuff. I was like, okay, maybe this kid doesn't get shot, but he gets punched in the face, and it looks very convincing, and I'm enjoying this. Awesome. But I do think it was a little bit of a waste, because that character could have been someone that had a lot of potential. I do think just by the end, he just gets like way too obnoxious to be really likable and stuff like that. So if he is in a sequel, I really do hope they clean it up with some good dialogue. For continuity's sake, whenever they do things in the future, they really should try and make the actor who's an adult look a little bit more like the child, because it looked like he really did, use crack to get all that weight off and stuff. That didn't make any sense to me, but hey. But yeah, I think the kid was kind of a missed opportunity and stuff like that, because he started off like with the potential to be really likable, but it just went in a just really bad direction. Tom?
First of all, this kid, it hits home for me because I'm a parent. Andre's a parent. I think we're the only two parents on the group that I know of. And I should have related to him in that way, also being a fat kid myself growing up, but the kid was so obnoxious. The way he was handled in the story, I did not like him. I don't know if it's even necessarily the actor, but it's definitely the direction and writing, because the way they handled the kid, I don't even think they pulled it back enough for me, like they did for Brooke, in a sense that there's no time in the movie I remember really sympathizing with the kid after the first 5-10 minutes. And I get what they were trying to do. They were trying to make the kid a lot like Deadpool, so he could relate to the kid. And that's why he's got a smart mouth and all that kind of shit, but he wasn't the same sense. There was a lot of malice in this kid, and there was supposed to be. I get that. But it was handled so poorly, and at no point do I really feel like the kid deserved Deadpool's attention outside the first scene. After that, it's like, really, Deadpool did you a service, after that you've done nothing to deserve Deadpool's loyalty, and they did a piss poor job of portraying that, and that's on the writers and directors, not the kid, as I said, because we look at another movie that just come out here recently that had a very similar child character, and that was Logan, and it was handled remarkably. And even though she was a violent psychopath, you cared about this character. And she was probably even worse as far as being dangerous and all that kind of shit in comparison to Russell. But unless I'm wrong, somebody correct me. I think everybody on this panel will agree that she was handled 10 times better in Logan than what this kid was handled here, and how the dynamic was there. So, I mean, that's how I feel about the whole subject, and I'll cut it off there. But yeah. Andre?
Yeah, no, actually, I agree with a lot of what you say there. I did not like the character, the way that he was written and directed. This is not a slight against the actor. The actor did as he was instructed, I'm sure, but I did not like the character. I did not sympathize with the character at all, at almost any point. Yeah, we see that basically he's getting the equivalent of gay conversion therapy, which of course is supposed to be really poignant and all of that, but the execution just didn't work. And I get that he was supposed to have been abused, and that's why he acted out the way that he did. But he was just so obnoxious, and the principal or headmaster or whatever at this anti-mutant conversion academy or holding ground or institution or whatever it was just so cartoonish and so over the top that I didn't take it seriously. I didn't empathize with it at all. So that's like a flaw with the filmmakers making it, not with the actor. But because of it, the character just didn't appeal to me, and this is such an important character that the movie to a very large extent rests upon. Because we kind of have to see it from Deadpool's point of view, like why he really wants to save this kid, which is really more about himself and his own redemption and trying to figure out this dream that he had. But still, no, it fell flat, didn't quite work for me. And that's really all I have to say about the kid. Another character that there was some level of controversy with was Domino. What did we all think about her? Jeffrey?
She gets lucky in the movie, but there was no development, pointless, and I thought she was going to play a major role due to the fact of the way people talked about her and hyped her up, before the movie was even out. So I was severely let down and disappointed by her character. To me, it was just pointless, and yeah, I just didn't see anything special about her in the film. Brooke.
Initially, when I found out that it was pretty much going to be a race swap, I was dreading what was going to be coming and stuff like that. I was like, I was really pleasantly surprised by Domino, and the actress and the way she played her and stuff like that. Like her action scenes were actually very well. Like I'm not sure if she did all her stunts, but it looked like she did the majority of them, and I was really impressed by that. That there wasn't too much of the CG. I really hate when people are doing martial arts and it switches to CG. Play to I'm really looking at you, and yeah, I was really impressed that she did her stunts, and I found her luck gimmick really like they did start to push it and stuff when she started. She was like, "Hey, I think we're gonna need a bus," and one appeared and stuff. But I think the way they used it, especially with the X-Force gag with all of them dying and her being one of the survivors and stuff like that, I think they used that pretty well. So far, of all the people I've talked to, she's been one of the highlights of the movie for them and stuff. So like now, I'm not saying I like her on the same level as I like Juggernaut. I'm just like not in the camp of, oh, I hate her, or I don't think she qualifies as the SJW standout for this film and stuff like that. I think they pretty much built a balanced character. Like I'm a little bit upset that she kind of fulfills the same archetype as Negasonic, as the one that of the member of the team that doesn't get on with Deadpool. But yeah, I still think she pretty much does her thing, and she's a cool character. Tom?
Yeah, I kind of brought up before the whole thing, about her kind of being interchangeable with Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and in that sense, I wish they would have give her a little bit different character. I mean, it just too much of the same dynamic there. Otherwise, she reminded me of a good drummer. Not a great drummer, not a bad drummer. A good drummer. A drummer you don't notice. He's keeping the beat, but he's not doing anything stupendous, so you don't really notice he's there. That's pretty much kind of how she played in the film, because they didn't really give her much development, and because she was so interchangeable with Negasonic Teenage Warhead, I literally forgot about her when I was doing my review, even though she's plastered all over the posters and stuff. I mean, she was a decent character, and yeah, she had some really neat stunts, and unfortunately that's kind of a raw area for the film itself. She just, I don't know, the CG around her, like a lot of that was kind of stuff that really bothered me too, because you could tell she was in front of a green screen, and I wonder if some of that was a lot of the reshoots and stuff like that. But anyway, Andre?
Well, let me begin by saying that I have never read any comics with Domino in them, or if I have, I haven't noticed. So I have absolutely zero familiarity with the character in the comics. As such, I don't really have any strong opinions on the race swapping one way or the other. In principle, I'm not in favor of it, but there has been times when it's worked. If this is one or if it isn't, I really cannot say. What I will say though is that, just judging from the movie itself, I liked her character fine. A little bit underdeveloped, but perfectly fine, and I really don't have any strong opinions on her, one way or the other. Now, something that many people do have stronger opinions on are the X-Force, or rather how easily they were dispatched of. What do we all think about that? Jeffrey?
Well, they had potential, especially after I had saw that they went through all that trouble recruiting them in the first place. Like, that's what got to me, and that didn't make sense, is that he went through that trouble recruiting a team, saying that he needed them to defeat, Juggernaut, etc., only for them to get dispatched so easily, and he didn't need them in the first place. He didn't need them at the end to defeat Juggernaut. So it's like, well, what was the point of going through all that trouble in the first place? Like, it was a waste. It was a waste to me. They could have X'd that out and beefed up some of the character arcs of some of the other characters. So I wasn't really impressed with the X-Force team. It was pointless. For me, they deflated my balloon at that point.
The X-Force, like seeing what we saw of them in the trailers and stuff, that was one of my incentives for going to the film. I'm not gonna lie, that was definitely one of my incentives. So as I said, when I got trolled and stuff like that, I'm not gonna lie, I expected them to kind of come back at some point in the movie and stuff like that, especially because of the fake footage they filmed. Well done, Fox. But I do, even though I wanted to see a lot more of the X-Force, I guess the gag kind of works. Like the gag was lifted from another film actually called Magruder. But the gag kind of worked. I definitely would have preferred to see the more balanced team of Terry Crews, Starfire, the Vanisher, whatnot and stuff. Like it probably would have made for a better movie and for just more variety. But I guess the gag worked. Kind of happy that they reversed it in the end though. So maybe we will get to see more of them. Let's see, Tom.
Yes, going off of what Brooke just said there, I do think the X-Force is coming back in a sequel because that's supposed to be basically Deadpool 3. We'll get into that more in a little bit. So I really don't think we've seen the end of them, and that was half the reason they were introduced in such a exuberant way to only be axed off in no time, to use a slasher term. But really, this scene or this gag or whatever you want to call it for whatever it is, because it's a lot more than a scene actually. It's quite a few scenes just to get to one gag basically. There's a series of gags within the gag. But point being that I was getting to is between the leak that we got and the gripes that were coming out of the test screenings, this is a glaring example of that. In a sense that the movie uses extensive screen time and story time and character development time to set up gags that really don't mean anything in the end, especially when you lose all these characters. Now granted, as I said at the start of this, I said, I know they're probably coming back in X-Force, and we get that at the end of the movie. We see the Deadpool reverses time and all that kind of stuff, whatever. Point being, though, this is, like I said, a glaring example of everything that's wrong with this movie. There's a lot of this throughout the movie, and it's not just this one scene. The Yukio thing we talked about is another example where it's just gag after gag and so much time wasted on telling these gags than telling an actual story. Andre?
I actually thought that bit was hilarious.
It was funny. Don't get me wrong.
I have no familiarity with the X-Force, so I don't have any attachment to them. I thought the recruitment process was cool and all of that, and I just loved how they all got Thanos'd one after the other in landing, and only the one with the luck superpower was the one that survived. So I thought that was pretty hilarious. A really nice throwback to the scene in the first movie where they were assembling all of the guns and then forgetting them in the taxi, and then just had to make do with the swords and their own hand power anyway. So I thought that was really cool. What was also cool, and maybe a mistake in the movie, I don't know, or a deliberate intent from the filmmakers, did you notice with the Juggernaut that they gathered the X-Force for the purpose of taking down the Juggernaut, and then they electrocute his ass, literally, but this doesn't kill him. Towards the end of the movie, as they are walking away happy and everything, the Juggernaut is waking up again, and he's crawling out of that pond. I don't think that shock to the ass is going to stop him very long, so it isn't going to be long before he's back in full force, and they're just walking away. That was nice and funny, I thought. So, yeah. Which evidently goes to show that there were some flaws with the movie, so let's go into that, the filmmaking aspects. What did you all think about the pacing? Because this movie was more than 2 hours long. Were there some scenes you thought dragged that maybe could have been shorter or cut out altogether? What did you think about the tone and the pace of the movie? Jeffrey?
I didn't like the pace in particular, especially when compared to the first one. I felt like it was dragged out. Like the scenes dealing with the kid was dragged out. The prison scene that just threw me off. That was dragged out. I wanted to get more of the future, more of Cable's future. I feel like that wasn't shown enough. So I would do, me personally, I would trade in the prison scene and some of the scenes with the kid for more Cable backstory.
So the pacing of the movie was genuinely okay as far as it being as far as just the general pace. It moved along very quickly and stuff like that. There were some times where it was a little bit off as far as tone, because there was some it would be serious at one moment and then go straight to a joke, and sometimes the jokes didn't land. So yeah, it left the film with a little bit of an awkward pacing issue as regards that. But on the whole, it was pretty enjoyable because it was kind of light entertainment. So yeah, I reckon the pacing, even though it has this issues, kind of works altogether.
Yeah, as I said kind of before, the problem with the movie was that a lot of the time was spent setting up a lot of gags at the expense of the film itself. And don't get me wrong, about 90% of the gags probably landed, and I remember laughing at most of them, but they really were detrimental to the movie overall, because you go from very serious scenes to something that's a way over the top comedy, and it was balanced so much better in the first film than it was here. This movie, I don't know if it got lost in the shuffle of making fun of sequels in a way that it became one of those things that is a bad sequel a lot of the times, that we consider a bad sequel because it's just twice as much of everything as the first film. And that's really what we got here, and it just didn't balance well overall. And the movie really could have used a good 10 minutes cut out of it for pacing. And again, I kind of reflect what, Jeffrey said. I probably would have spent a little bit more time with Cable in the future and got to know the kid Evil in the future. And then in return, if they would have set the kid up as more innocent and stuff like that in Deadpool's eyes, I think that was supposed to be the more major pull of the movie, is that, Deadpool doesn't see this kid as some murderous, raging monster, but Cable does, and that's where they're supposed to be. But in the end, we really see so much out of the kid that's violent of nature and just being an asshole that, yeah, we can see him turning into this jerk. So it just really kind of is detrimental to the story overall in that sense as well. So that's kind of my feelings on that. Besides that, I mean, really, there was just so much little stuff overall that could have been tightened up and cut better. I mean, even though a lot of the jokes landed, some of them could have been cut. That's about it. Andre?
Yeah, I thought that the pace was out of whack throughout the entire movie. That is where I really felt the absence of Tim Miller, and I can kind of see where they had a disagreement, because I can imagine that half of the stuff that was in the movie, I thought lots of it was really indulgent and completely unnecessary, and I can see why Ryan Reynolds would have wanted it in there, and why Tim Miller would have said, no. I think the best would have been if they came to some kind of compromise. Because as it was, we got to see Ryan Reynolds go amok and just do things his way and pace things his way, which might be great for each individual scene, but I'm not so sure about the movie as a whole. Like, for instance, the sequence when he was dying and he just wouldn't die and he kept on with his final word after final word, and to me, it just went on for way too long.
A very overused joke already, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the joke was overused right away. Like, it was overused before they even got in there. But the way that it was pulled off, I know it's supposed to be some satire in there and some meta-irony and stuff like that. But to me, it just fell so flat. And there is where you really needed a director like Tim Miller to come in and say, no, we're going to cut it right here. And you needed someone like Tim Miller to go and say that in every single scene. And cut like a couple of minutes out of each and every scene in the movie. Because that's the thing here. If you look at the story, there's no reason why this story had to be more than a 2-hour movie. Because I don't mind movies being 2 hours long as a principle or anything. A movie should be as long as it needs to be to tell the story it needs in the right pace. Sometimes that is 3 hours, sometimes that is 5 hours, and sometimes it is 90 minutes, or sometimes it's 1 hour 45. This movie ran too long, and that could have been fixed by every single scene being a little bit shorter and the pace being tightened a little bit. So I think that the movie actually suffered from the absence of Tim Miller. Is there something else we reacted to?
Yeah. I'm sure everyone who knows about Juggernaut knows he's a beast, and he took like basically all of the X-Men just to slow him down, and for him just to be defeated by Colossus like solo and like 2 trainees and stuff like that was just a little bit disappointing, especially for a movie that was doing so well as far as fan service is concerned and stuff like that. Because the fact that they had Juggernaut, and this has been the best live action rendition of him so far, even though he wasn't live action, was really cool. But the fact that he was just taken down by like Colossus, even, and especially when they had the other X-Men there, and that X-Men gag was actually pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, I do like that. But yeah, I was kind of disappointed. I was kind of disappointed by the fact that I didn't take Cable and everybody else to chip in to take down Juggernaut.
Yeah, I wasn't impressed with how Juggernaut was presented in the CGI form. Otherwise, I liked him. But again, there's another example of how he was taken out so easy at the expense of a gag.
Yeah.
Really, just so he could have electric wire shoved up his ass is really, just at that expense. But otherwise, yeah, the CGI for me, I had a big issue with. There was so much bad CGI throughout. Whether it was the background or the characters themselves, none of it really looked all that convincing. From the first shot when Deadpool blows himself up, that looked horrible. I wouldn't say that the CGI in the first film was, great, but it was 10 times better than this. And considering how much more money was spent on this, it was just really a letdown in my eyes. I don't know if it really bothered anybody else, but it really took me out of the movie at sometimes. And I know they make a joke about it even in the film, so I won't want to completely sound like a snob. But it really was subpar considering how much more was spent on this movie.
Speaking of how much more was spent on the movie, this movie has a budget of 110 million, more than twice the budget of the original Deadpool, and it earned 125 million in its domestic opening weekend, which is below early estimates and also below the opening of the original Deadpool back in 2016. Do you have any particular opinions on this box office drop, and what do you think may be the cause of that? Jeffrey?
I would say the story, first and foremost. It should have been a lot better than what it was. Overall, the couple plot holes and the behind-the-scenes drama in the leaks as well, it didn't help. That's what I think contributed to it. And also opening up around Avengers and the Solo window. I think they're sort of cannibalizing each other, so to speak.
Yeah, I reckon the two major things are the Avengers. And funny enough, when I went to go and see it, Black Panther was still showing and stuff, and it was actually saw quite a few people going to see that still. So I don't think there's superhero fatigue, as some people have put it, but I do think the windows of these movies are too close, and the fact that some people may have seen this as not as strong as the first has breeded some negative word of mouth. So that's definitely going to be a factor with the opening gross. But yeah, I reckon the main thing that's affecting it is definitely just releasing so close to Avengers. I mean, some people haven't seen it yet, and some people are still going back to see it multiple times. Like me, I've seen it twice in the cinema myself. So yeah, it is really, 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 really interesting to see how these other superhero movies are affecting each other. But then again, if you like Deadpool, Deadpool is pretty much its own thing. So if you're going to see Deadpool, you're going to see Deadpool. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of legs this movie has in the upcoming weeks. Tom?
Yeah, not to repeat too much of what was just said, but I think Brooke hit on two major points. And that is, A, that it's coming off of a movie that everybody expected was going to be big, but much bigger than they expected it to be. And that was Avengers, of course. And it's still pretty strong. So I think that ate up a little bit of its business. But don't get me wrong, it made a very respectable $125 million its opening weekend. That's nothing to balk at, especially for an R-rated film. But it did do less than the original, which, in this era of superhero films, is not good. Because normally these type of movies do a good anywhere from 20 to 40% better than the film preceding it, as long as the film preceding it was really good. And there was an outrageously positive response to Deadpool, and it was even probably a bigger hit on video, even though it was a surprise hit in theaters to begin with. So I'm really kind of surprised that it didn't do closer to the original projections than it did. But as I said, there's two factors, one being Avengers, other being word of mouth, because I have a hard time believing that the general audience was really in on all the behind the scenes drama, the death of the stunt woman, or any of the stuff that we talked about here on Midnight's Edge. So I have a hard time believing that affected the overall crowd that much. I think what did hurt it, though, as well, like we said, with where it opened. If it would have opened in the middle of June, say a few weeks out from Solo and a few more weeks out from Avengers, it probably would have had a better chance to breaking that record and doing much better than the first film. Now, I know some of you guys out there might not agree with me. Some of the people on the panel here might not even agree with me, but I think it could have had more potential to hit closer to that 150 million mark had it come out in the middle of June instead. Andre?
No, I agree with several of you that the movie underperformed a tiny little bit. Well, let's first establish that opening to 125 million against a budget of 110 million is not a disappointment in any way, shape or form whatsoever. I get that people were expecting more, But personally, I think that those expectations might have been a little bit lofty. The original Deadpool overperformed to such a massive extent that words can barely describe how much it overperformed. And I honestly don't think that Deadpool has that much to grow from there. Like, the first movie was a phenomenon, and I don't think that that's something that can be repeated that easily. Like, it really captured lightning in a bottle, and there were so many things that just went right. And honestly, I did not expect the second one to open bigger than the first one, and if it did, not much bigger. As it stands, it opened within 10 millions, and at the box office at this level, that's nothing at all to scoff at. Now, why did it open lower? Well, I think it's mostly two reasons. One is that while not any superhero burnout necessarily, I agree with several of you in that there now might have been too many similar comic book movies opening too close to each other. Because now, in the last 2 months, we've had Black Panther, we've had Avengers, and now we have Deadpool 2. And then it's Han Solo right around the corner, and there's Jurassic Park, and even Venom still to come.
Ant-Man.
Yeah, so now we've had so many movies so early, and I think that has a lot to do with this slight drop. And this is a slight drop, so let's not be too dramatic here. But what has been said, though, is that how this movie performs will, one way or the other, decide the future of Deadpool on film. If they continue with Deadpool solo movies, or if Deadpool 3 is going to be his appearance in X-Force. That, of course, is going to depend a lot on if Fox will continue to make the movies if the Disney acquisition falls apart, or if Disney will be taking over the character. What do you guys think about the future of Deadpool on film? Jeffrey?
Bob Iger was quoted saying at an investor conference that Deadpool is going to continue to be Deadpool when Disney purchases Fox. So I don't think there's going to, necessarily be a huge change. And he also mentioned that Deadpool would join the Avengers. So I can see him throwing out some gags and lines saying, oh, this is a PG-13 movie, something like that. I know Tom mentioned that a while back, a couple of podcasts ago. So, yeah, I do think I'm hoping that the acquisition goes through. And I think it's going to be something good moving forward. Brooke?
Well, me personally, I hope that even though I'm relatively a big fan of what's happening right now, it's pretty much what fans have already wanted. It's pretty much what fans have always wanted. Ryan Reynolds helming Deadpool. I'm very interested to see where Marvel would take it. I really want to see him mixing with Robert Downey Jr. and the rest of the crew in the Avengers and stuff. I think that would be really cool to have Deadpool mix it up with the Avengers. That being said, I do hope that Kevin Feige or another director is there to rein in Ryan Reynolds' wackiness, because as we can see, even though it's good, it doesn't always lead to cinema gold. And if they want to get back to the success which Deadpool had initially, I think that's what they've got to do. They've got to have someone there that could rein in the wackiness and say, hey, let's put this ship back on course and make this, something proper. But I'm gonna lie, I am a big fan of what they've done they have been doing. They didn't have to give the fans what they wanted, you know what I'm saying? They really didn't. And one thing I'm really happy about is that Ryan Reynolds relishes this. Even him in the end, just going a little bit off topic, just talking about the stingers and stuff like that, him shooting the other Deadpool, all of that stuff just shows that he's really behind the whole property and stuff like that. So as long as they can keep that and bring it to the MCU, I'll be really happy. Tom?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all that for the most part. to just kind of dissipate some of the doom and gloom from earlier, there's nothing to balk at with this box office, and this is going to just reinforce Disney, even if they do take over Fox, in that they need to let Deadpool continue on his own. And I'm sure, as also pointed out, Ryan Reynolds is such a big fan that anytime, Kevin Feige gives him a call and says, hey, you want to show up for a few minutes in this movie, he'll do it. No problem, and have fun with it. Especially, I can see him having a lot of fun with, like, end credit scenes. That's where I can see him shining the most. Because I don't think they're going to use his fourth wall breaking humor too damn much in the regular movies, because most of them are too serious. But I could see him showing up in a Spider-Man movie or something to that effect, that, his humor will lend itself a little bit better to the story, but not so much maybe a Captain America movie. That happy medium is maybe an Iron Man movie. I could see him there, and like we said, having that little joke with, what the beep? Why am I being bleeped? Oh yeah, PG-13. And that's just all they need to explain why he's got to be a little bit more tempered than he normally is. But then he can still do his R-rated X-Force and Deadpool films over on the Fox side of things, which I think is the plan overall. And as far as the X-Force goes, I think that's going to depend on how that movie plays out and how many more Deadpool movies we get going down the line. Because if that movie kind of just does a little bit less than this movie, I think they'll say, okay, we've had our run. That's a nice little round trilogy. Deadpool can pop up in movies here and there, but it'll be a little bit probably before we see another full-on Deadpool movie if that movie underperforms. This movie did great at the box office for an R-rated film like this, and a sequel at that. But even though, like I said, though, generally in this kind of superhero atmosphere, the sequels tend to do a little bit better than the previous film if the film was well received. That's the only thing that causes me a little bit of pause here. So, Andre?
Yeah, well, I think that the most likely course of action is that the Disney deal is going to go through one way or the other, and it's going to be Disney that makes the next Deadpool incarnation. Furthermore, if I were a betting man, which generally I am not, but if I were, then I would say that there's not going to be any X-Force movie. I do not believe that's going to happen. The brand right now is Deadpool, not X-Force. X-Force is but a gag inside of a Deadpool movie. So I think they're going to stick with Deadpool going forward. This box office shows that there is absolutely a market for Deadpool there. All that the character really needs is someone who performs the function of Tim Miller in the first, and that Kevin Feige does in the MCU. Basically, you need someone to reel Ryan Reynolds in, or not necessarily reel him in, but saying, these are the confines.
Keep him on course.
Exactly. Like, for instance, in this scene right here, you can do your thing, but you do it in 45 seconds and not 4 fucking minutes. Like that extended death sequence. Like, Ryan Reynolds needs to be reminded, you are making a Deadpool movie here. It needs to work as a Deadpool movie, and not an extended Family Guy gag, which this movie suffered a little bit from. As long as someone can be brought in to do that, then the future looks very fine for Deadpool. Personally, I consider this movie to be Deadpool's Iron Man 2.
Yeah, and everybody has to remember, Ryan Reynolds is an actor. So when he has the control, it's going to be all about him. And even though the next movie even though you say there won't be an X-Force, I think there will be, but it will be de facto Deadpool 3. It's just the next extension. Here on out, he's just got that many characters around him. It'll basically be an X-Force adventure. But yeah, that's just what I think is going to happen, because they've already talked about it, and it's nearing production. So yeah, anyway, that's my final thought on that.
Guys, any other final words?
Even though the general consensus is that this is like kind of mediocre-ish, I would like to say that I do like the movie overall, and I do hope they continue and they don't get cold feet because of the initial response. I really hope that Ryan Reynolds just tempers his ego and manages to get it back together with Tim Miller or somebody else that can help temper his wildness when it comes to creativity.
I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. We already discussed what could have been improved. I'm hoping that they learn from the mistakes of this one and they bring back Tim Miller for the third chapter. Yeah, that's it for me.
All right, well, we'd like to thank our panelists for joining us today, Jeffrey and Brooke, who also have some of their own things going on, like Brooke, who's on MVP Magazine on YouTube, and Jeffery, who we have an interview with, and you can check out the link down below if you want to learn more about him. He's a filmmaker himself. And of course, Andre and myself want to thank you for joining us here on this Deadpool 2 Roundtable.
If you like this video, then please click the subscribe button. And don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified for all the latest uploaded content. Due to recent changes to YouTube's monetization policies, we'd also like to ask you to please consider supporting Midnight's Edge and its sister channel, Midnight's Edge After Dark, through Patreon. As thanks for their support, patrons will receive early notifications of mini-documentaries, special behind-the-scenes making of the Edge videos, bloopers, outtakes, lost episodes, and more. You can support the channel for as little as $1 a month. Be sure to check back for news and analysis on the corporate politics behind your favorite genre movies, as well as updates and discussion here at Midnight's Edge.